I now want to spend some time talking about understanding and troubleshooting the Windows boot process. Okay, so essentially, when you turn your computer on, there's a series of things that have to happen. First off, if you've got an older computer, it uses what is known as BIOS, basic input output system, that actually is going to wake the components up, locate your hard drive, find your operating system, and boot it up. The newer computers that have come out in the last 15 or so years support what's called UEFI, Unified Extensible Firmware Interface, which is like BIOS, but it's more advanced. It supports a lot more security features, and it allows you to boot a lot faster than BIOS computers could do. Okay, more often than not, they'll refer to UEFI as BIOS, so you'll still hear it referred to as the older name. Sometimes they'll call it UEFI BIOS. But when you turn your computer on, power comes in through the power supply, goes to the motherboard, goes to the processor. At that point, it's going to load either BIOS or UEFI, which is sort of the beginning processes of getting your computer booted up. Now, I want to take a look here just by making a little drawing of, let's say you had a hard drive, okay? Let's say that this little cylinder thing that I'm going to draw here is going to represent a hard drive. Okay, so we got a hard drive here, cylinder, hard drive, and just draw this out. And let's say we've got a couple of partitions that are part of that hard drive. Okay, so maybe we've got a C drive and we got a D drive. Okay, this disk is called disk 0. Okay, so disk 0, and we have a C drive and we have a D drive. And these are our partitions on our disk. Okay, so the thing I want to point out is that when you set up a disk gets initialized by your operating system, and it's going to be initialized with something called a master boot code. The master boot code is going to be called an MBR, and then there is another format called GPT, which is actually a newer format. MBR goes all the way back to the 1970s. Okay, it was created by IBM. It's the master boot record code that basically specifies how your disk is partitioned. And GPT is newer and supports a bunch more partitions, and you can have much bigger drives. MBR would limit you to only 2 terabyte drives. GPT can do up to the exabyte level in drive space. So it's a newer format. Either way, when you boot your computer up and your BIOS UEFI is loading your disk, it's going to read this code to figure out how everything is partitioned. Okay, another thing we've got on our computer when it comes to our disk booting up is we have something called a boot sector. Every disk that is bootable has a boot sector. So this partition C drive that's got Windows on it is has a boot sector, and so would this D drive if the D drive was able to be booted on as well. Of course, we don't really probably have an operating system on the D drive. We could, but more often than not, we don't. Okay, so we have the boot sector. Okay, so from there, on our C drive, which is probably where Windows is installed, we have something called the BCD. Okay, BCD, and this stands for Boot Configuration Data. I'm just going to say Boot Config Data to kind of save some room. Okay, Boot Configuration Data. Let me actually move this over just to make some more room. Okay, so Boot Configuration Data, BCD. This is what our computer uses when it boots up. And we can actually view that, and this is what's going to help our computer figure out where our operating system is. It also, if we are dual booting, let's say we have Windows 10 on the C drive and Windows 7 on the D drive, we're dual booting, BCD would provide us with a dual boot menu as well. Okay, so I'll show you some commands coming up in the next segment that you can kind of look at all of that. But ultimately, your BCD is what locates Windows and boots up Windows. Okay. Now, for a troubleshooting concept, I want to point out that you could, if something gets messed up, okay, something gets broken, you could boot your computer up and you could get an error message. All right, let me just shrink this down. You could get an error message, and the error message might say missing or corrupted MBR. It could say missing or corrupted boot sector. It could say missing or corrupted boot configuration data. So if that ever happens, there is a command that you can use in the Windows command prompt. If you boot into the Windows RE, like what we talked about before, there is a command that I can run, and it's called bootrec. Bootrec, boot recovery, okay? And I've got a switch I can use with that. The first one is called the fix MBR switch. Okay, that switch is going to help me fix a problem related to this MBR GPT. So if it says missing MBR or something, you can run this command bootrec fix MBR, and that's going to fix your problem. Okay, another command is called bootrec /fix boot. If you get an error message that says that your computer, its boot sector is messed up, then you could run that bootrec /fix boot. And then lastly, if something's messed up in Windows 10, you get an error message that says something like your boot manager, boot config is missing or corrupted. You can actually use this command right here, and this is going to be a way to fix your boot configuration data. Okay, and that command is called rebuild BCD. Okay, that is going to let you go in and fix this boot configuration data. So if you get an error message pops up, you can actually fix that problem using bootrec. So bootrec is a very good command, a very helpful command that you can use. If you just want to see your BCD information on a disk, you can run BCD edit, okay? But if you actually want to fix a problem related to your boot configuration, then you can use bootrec to do that. All right, you can do that through the Windows RE, the recovery environment, if you needed to. Okay, so now I'm on my Windows 10 computer, and I want to show you some of the boot configuration stuff you can deal with. So first off, I want to show you you can actually go down here to search. You can type msconfig, okay, and you can open up the msconfig tool, which is called System Configuration. And from there, once this tool runs up, you're going to notice you have different tabs. I have a tab called Boot, and this involves a little bit of my boot configuration. Okay, I can go in here, and if I was dual booting with another operating system like Windows 7, I could select which one I want to boot to. Now keep in mind, dual booting is not very common these days because people use virtual machines these days most of the time when they want to have multiple operating systems. Dual booting used to be, something people would generally do. And you have this little 30-second timer. If you want to boot into safe mode, you can do that here. Okay, so that is this little boot menu is controlled through this BCD boot configuration data, and this is sort of the graphical way you could do it. But if you really want to edit the details when it comes to all of this, you have a command that does that. And I'm going to go to command prompt, type CMD, and run this as an administrator. Okay, and here I am in command prompt, all right, and we'll just kind of zoom in on that. I can run a command here called BCD edit. So I'm going to type that in, BCD edit, and I can see my boot configuration. Now you'll notice there's two different sections here. One is called the boot manager and one is called the boot loader. When you turn your computer on and it reads the master boot record, master boot code, the boot manager gets loaded first. This is like a little mini operating system, and its job is to do nothing more than just boot up Windows, okay? And it also will show you a dual boot menu if you were dual booting with another operating system. But what this guy's going to do, if you don't have another, to have more than one operating system, it's just going to load the bootloader. And as you can see, this computer only has one operating system. It's got the boot manager here that's going to load the bootloader. The bootloader, winload.exe, when that gets loaded, that's when you see the Windows logo pop up on your screen. Okay, so this actually represents my actual operating system. Okay, now you really shouldn't have to change that stuff very often. Some of it can be changed through the Windows settings itself, but you could use BCD edit if you wanted to edit this. You could also use BCD edit if you type BCD edit /?. You'll also notice that you could hit enter on that, and you can actually see there's other switches. I could actually back up my boot configuration information if I wanted to. So there's a lot of stuff here. So if you want to learn more about that, I encourage you to look up their knowledge base article on BCD edit in the Microsoft knowledge base, because it'll explain every one of the switches and explains how to use it. But that gives you a quick rundown though on BCD edit, and as well as the MS config and where we can go and configure some of that.